there's a fascinating anti-intellectual streak in a lot of the hobbies and kind of spaces that I enjoy, you know. People who, again, they hate thinking about shit. And not only do they hate it, if they catch you thinking about shit, dude, that they are going to get so mad. How dare you? How dare you think about things? It's really interesting. I have to imagine it comes from some kind of insecurity. Like, people, like, I don't feel like I am smart enough to analyze the artwork that I consume, and it intimidates me. Maybe people have had I'm being very charitable here. Maybe people have had bad experiences with, you know, people who interpret stuff more try to actually analyze stuff more. People who interpret artwork more analytically. Maybe they've had bad experiences with that in school or something like that, or felt belittled or something. And it's like when they see someone who does that, they're like, so first of all, they personally are like, fuck that. I'm not going to think at all. I'm not even going to try. Like this kind of spiteful response. And then they see someone else trying to actually be a little analytical or look at something through a different lens. And that's like threatening to them, because they're very comfortable in the idea that they don't have to think about anything. Almost, I wonder if it's like, I don't have to think about it. And once you're so ingrained in the mindset that you shouldn't have to think about something critically, that there actually is nothing. Like, I'm not being lazy. There is literally nothing here to analyze. So when something does, you're like, something in your brain goes off and you're like, oh, fuck. Oh, no. Oh, God, I have to stop that. Shut up. Stop thinking about stuff. I think it might actually be more common that a lot of people just pick and choose what analysis they want to listen to, and it usually ends up aligning with their pre-existing notions about things. So do I have a point to this little spiel, this little rant? I don't know. I don't listen to those people. I try to ignore them. I like to actually have interesting discussions about artwork and trying to interpret it and stuff. I'm like, sometimes I am like a little, it's almost like unrelated, but occasionally I'm like surprised at like a lack of, I don't know. Like, I've made a couple videos in the past where the TLC video, the Tender Loving Care video for me, got kind of a personal streak to it. Like, there was a personal aspect to it, in that one of the reasons I wanted to make it wasn't just because I found it the game so interesting, or that I connected to it in a way. Like, I really stuck my head in there. But also that when I went to look up discussion about the game, I was really disappointed with like the caliber of it. There was a lot of negative discussion from people who just, in my opinion, I don't know, either had very weird readings of the game that I didn't relate to, or were just kind of like very surface level, like, what? John Hurt asks you about sex? Isn't this crazy? And then just dismissing like anything that could be gleaned, that anything that you could actually draw from the game, of like any ideas it's trying to put out. And then likewise, the positive reviews, like the positive discussion of TLC, was also very shallow, I thought, and just kind of like, yeah, it's kind of entertaining for like a few hours. Kill a few hours like that. And I was like, I feel like no one's talking about the shit that seems very, like, I don't know, right? Like, I almost feel a little crazy when I picked up on this thing, like in the first cutscene, the first scene that you watch, and like the different viewpoints of the characters that you get. And then you go read their diaries. And then you see them in these different situations, and the player has knowledge that the characters don't. And I'm like, okay, that's kind of interesting. And then you go into the bathroom, and there's a book about voyeurism. And I'm like, oh, that is very intentional. I feel like this game is trying to suggest something to me. Like, there's something to think about. And then you start looking at the rest of the game with the idea of voyeurism, observation, and the way that fits into how the characters are written and the different versions of scenes you get. Harvester was much the same. I went and like read and watched like other people's analyses and videos on Harvester, and a lot of them just kind of stop at talking about the violence. And I thought that was like a huge missed opportunity, because the game like straight up tells you what it's about. And yes, violence is one of those things. And you'll get, Gilbert, is it Gilbert Austin or Austin Gilbert? It's so messed up that he has both those, that he has the two first names. You'll get the creator of the game talking about the violence, but then like there's just a scene where the Wasp Woman goes on a big monologue that is so obviously like a series of thematic statements, and then no one ever brings that up. No one ever is like, hey, here's a bunch of ideas the game is directly feeding to you that you can see at the beginning of the game. As soon as you leave the house, you can go meet her. Would it be worth analyzing the rest of the game with these ideas in mind? And like, no one seemed to do that. Because like once you start doing that, you're like, holy shit, it's like the whole game is about these things that she talks about. Sacrifice, consumption, the social order, and perceptions that people have of your role in society. Like it's so ingrained into like practically every single character. It's everywhere. And I'm like, am I crazy? Like, I don't think I'm a genius for noticing this stuff. I think I'm just paying attention to what the game is telling me. That doesn't really have anything to do with anti-intellectualism. It's just, I don't know. It's like, I like thinking about stuff like this. And sometimes, yeah, I don't know. You kind of get a sense, you have to kind of develop like a gut instinct for it. Like, I'm working on a video about something right now that I don't think is very deep. I don't think it runs very deep. It's not going for anything that is particularly... There's not some life-changing commentary about human society within, right? I still think it's interesting and worth talking about, and it's interesting to me, and interesting enough for me to want to make a video about it. But like I find that when you watch something, read something, play something, listen to something, there are like little tells. That's the best way I can describe it. There's like little tells that the creator put some thought into it, that the creator is suggesting something beyond the scope of what's literally on, like, in front of you. Like, okay, yeah, on the surface, this is a story about this, but hey, there's like a line right here, and you're like, that seems like it goes a little beyond the scope. Like, it's a little beyond the scope of what's directly happening in the plot. Does that give us a clue as to maybe what they were pulling at? And sometimes stories really are just created with no real like deeper commentary to them, you know. I don't want to like legitimize the curtains are blue kind of people or that kind of argument, but sometimes I will admit like the story's not that deep, although that doesn't preclude it from like being analyzed, right? There's many different perspectives that this is why I don't like when people talk about art is political or all art is not political or what, you know, because I think I've said this before on this podcast. My view, my thinking is that politics is one lens through which you can analyze something, and there are many lenses, right? Have I ever talked about oh my god, I don't want to, this is like a whole topic. Look up the 4 essences of scripture, and maybe you'll figure out what I'm talking about. But you can take one story, one piece of art, one piece of media, whatever, and it is totally acceptable to look at it in multiple different ways, including literally. It's totally fine to analyze something on a literal level. But I think you also should be open to the idea that there are many ways. There are many different ways that you can look at something that don't negate the other ways. You know, just because I want to read something in a political, put something in a political perspective, in a historical context, in like an ethical analysis, just because I want to do that doesn't mean that your literal reading of it isn't valid. It's fine. In fact, I think most people go into stuff, including me, just reading stuff on a literal level. I think I default to reading things on a literal level until I see things that suggest otherwise, right? For instance, I start a movie and I find out it takes place in a certain time period. Oh, okay. Well, there's a historical context to put this in. There's a historical perspective. This is representing the past. That's one way to analyze it. There are many ways, like, I remember I had a history teacher in high school who just didn't like certain movies because they were not historically accurate. And I was like, I mean, I get it. You're like a big history nerd. But from my perspective, it's like, I think that you should be able to look at something from like multiple lenses. Like, okay, is this historically accurate? No. But is it like a well-constructed film? Is it interesting? Is it exciting? You know, it might very well be. I say this as someone who got all hissy over the Tetris movie not being accurate. Actually, no, I'll back that up. The Tetris movie was not accurate to the real history and was not accurate in a lame way. Like the new story, like the stuff they fabricated for that movie, like was kind of lame and derivative and a little cringe. And was less interesting than the real story. Go watch my video about it. Did I have a point to all this? I don't know. I have to respond to a DM real quick. Okay, DM responded to. I'm getting cards out of the bulk box at tonight's local.